Rachel, what is sex discrimination?
Sex discrimination is a civil wrong set out in the Equality Act 2010. There are 4 types of sex discrimination. Firstly, there is direct sex discrimination. Secondly, there is indirect sex discrimination. Thirdly, there is harassment, sexual harassment. And fourthly, there is victimisation.
And can you explain to me about direct sex discrimination?
Direct sex discrimination is when a woman, now I have to preface that by saying it's not confined to women, men can also be discriminated against, but generally speaking it's nearly always women. It's when a woman is treated less favourably than a man because of her gender. Now, for example, if a woman was dismissed because she was pregnant, that would be direct sex discrimination.
What about indirect sex discrimination?
Okay, this is when the employer applies what is referred to as a PCP, which stands for a provision, criteria or practice, which disadvantages the woman, would disadvantage women as a group, and the employer cannot justify it as a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. For example, if the employer applied a blanket refusal for flexible or indeed part-time working, that could indirectly discriminate against women. The reason for that is it's generally accepted that women have more of a role in the childcare responsibilities arena. Likewise, if police officers were given a bonus, for example, for night working, this could indirectly discriminate against women for much the same reasons.
And can you explain sexual harassment?
There are 2 types of sexual harassment. One is where the employer engages in unwanted conduct of a sexual nature. The second is where it's unwanted conduct, but maybe not of a sexual nature, but is related to the sex. So an example of the former would be an employer who puts pornographic posters around the workplace. An example of the latter would be an employer using, or one of the employer's staff, using sexually offensive language to the woman. The conduct has to be unwanted and it must have the purpose or effect of violating the woman's dignity at work. It's very much a subjective test. So if the woman takes it badly or doesn't like it, then she will succeed in her claim, as long, of course, it's of a sexual nature, the harassment.
What is victimisation, Rachel?
Victimisation is where the worker suffers a detriment as a result of doing a protected act. Now that can include, for example, raising a grievance that you have been sexually discriminated against, or indeed bringing an employment tribunal claim.
What are the remedies for sex discrimination?
Well, the employee or the worker has to bring a claim in the employment tribunal. There are strict time limits for bringing that claim, and generally they have to be brought within 3 months, less 1 day, of the discriminatory act, or if it's a series of acts, with the last date of the series of those acts. If the claimant succeeds in the claim, the employment tribunal will make an award for compensation. This will be directly related to the financial losses she or he has suffered as a result of the discriminatory treatment. But it can also include, and will also include, an award for injury to feelings. This can see an award ranging from anything from £500 for a one-off, not very serious incident if you like, to up to £30,000 for a prolonged, systematic campaign of discrimination against a woman. Obviously each case depends on its own facts.
How easy is it to succeed with a sex discrimination claim?
Now obviously every case depends on its own specific facts, and it's impossible to apply a broad brush to every claim of sex discrimination. However, it's important for a woman to remember that an employer will very rarely, if ever, admit that they have discriminated against her on the grounds of her sex. For that reason, when these claims go to tribunal, we often ask the employment tribunal to draw an inference in the absence of any admission. If you can show a prima facie, and by prima facie I mean on the face of it, case, you can show the difference in the gender and the differential treatment, the employment tribunal will then look to the employer to give a non-discriminatory explanation for the treatment. An example would be an employee telling her employer that she's pregnant, and then a week later being put through a consultation exercise and made redundant. Now, on the face of it, because of the timing, it doesn't look good. It looks as if the employer may have made her redundant because of the pregnancy. They will then look to the employer to explain. Now, if the employer can explain or demonstrate that this was a genuine redundancy, albeit one with bad timing, the tribunal will be satisfied that it was nothing to do with her pregnancy. The kind of things they will look at is the reasons for the redundancy, whether other people were made redundant at the same time. If, however, the employer cannot show that, or indeed this woman was singled out, they had no other people they were making redundant at the same time, the tribunal may very well draw an inference that the real reason for that woman's redundancy was her pregnancy, in which case her claim for both unfair dismissal and sex discrimination will succeed.
What would you advise an employee to do if he or she thinks they have suffered sex discrimination?
Firstly, I would advise them to gather all of the evidence. Now, sometimes there isn't a lot of evidence. You don't get the smoking gun in an email which says, "Get rid of Lucy, she's pregnant." But as much evidence as you can. Now, that can also consist of a diary. If you keep a diary at the time of the events, they're very persuasive to the employment tribunal because they're contemporaneous. I always advise my clients to prepare a chronology for me, which sets out the series of events which have got them to where they are.
And what would you recommend that an employee does next?
Call us. Give us a call, and we're more than happy to have an initial no-charge conversation with you over the telephone to see if we think there's something there and something we can help you with and take it forward.